Okay, so Jill and I are going to demonstrate and talk to you about one of my very favourite techniques, which is called Poetics. Most people, if you ask them if they would like to write a poem, will probably look at you like they're crazy and think they can't. So this is it's actually a really important warm-up activity into the exercise. And I always do this, what I'm going to do with Jill in a minute, before I do the more important exercise. The more important exercise is a way to enable people to use their own words to express how they're feeling about something like a sexual assault. So you wouldn't just launch into trying to do that without doing this preliminary activity. Some people think the preliminary activity is a bit silly, but then they're at the end result of the final poem, it usually moves people. So Jill, can you have a think about your favourite food? I'll give you a minute because I know there's a few possibilities. And when Jill starts speaking, what I'll be doing is writing down key words that she says. Have you got something?
Yes.
Okay, and then so Jill's got the idea. The next part is that I'm going to ask her some prompting questions, and what I'll be writing is the main words from the answer. Okay, Jill, what does that, you got it in your head? Okay, so what does that food look like?
Creamy, soft, delicious.
Now you've started telling me, what does it taste like? It's delicious. What does it taste like?
Lemons.
What does it look like?
What does it look like?
Yeah, if you had to describe it, what does it look like visually?
It's in a bowl with a spoon.
How do you feel when you start thinking, you can see it, it's waiting for you. How does it feel when you're thinking about putting the spoon in the bowl and bringing it up to your mouth? What does that feel like for you?
Oh, great anticipation.
And how does it feel once it's in your mouth?
Ah, yum.
And how does it feel after it's all finished?
Really good. I enjoyed that.
Do you have any thoughts about that food? What do you think when you think about it?
It's a treat. It's something that I really enjoy. I don't have it all the time, but when I do have it, I really enjoy it.
Okay. So, can I read you the poem that I think we just wrote together?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try and do my best poet's voice. All right. Creamy, soft, delicious. Lemons in a bowl with a spoon. Great anticipation. Yum. Really good. I enjoyed that. It's a treat. What do you think?
That's good.
You wrote a pretty good poem.
Yeah, that is really good.
If we need a title for this poem, what do you think would be a good title?
Lemon meringue ice cream.
I wondered what it was. So we're going to call it lemon meringue ice cream.
Yes.
It's really important, I think, that the person that wrote the poem titles it, because it could have been titled It's a Treat, because that's what I got from talking to you, that was the main focus, that this is something I deserve, I look forward to, I work hard, I'm allowed to have this, I've lived a life, but yeah, you decided to go with what it actually was. But there's any number of those words could be, and I could suggest that, but it's important that the client themselves actually labels it. To move into the more complex poem, it's actually a very similar process. So we're actually asking the similar kinds of questions. They're very concrete questions to start with, because they're asking about, actually I've got a tip sheet here for, I might read off. What does he look like? You could ask what sort of a person he was. I would at some point ask how the person felt about what they did, but the flow will kind of come naturally once the person starts talking, I think. I sometimes ask if he said any words to the person, what should happen to him, gives them a chance to express their thoughts about that, which can be quite ugly, I might warn you at times. I also like to sometimes ask, what do you think about yourself because of what happened, and how it might have changed you. But it's not really a script, do you find?
No, because it depends on what they answer to one question, usually the next one you ask.
Yeah, leads. So I have permission to share one of these poems with you. The person who wrote this poem chose to call it Regret, so I'm just going to read it. And maybe when I'm reading it, you might even think about what kinds of questions I might have asked to prompt the words that came from the client. Tall, brown hair, a brown-eyed boy. I hate his bloody guts. I hate the way I felt. A fool believing his fucking lies. He should rot in jail for hurting me. Should hurt him there the way he hurt me. I should be happy, because I have a son to live for. I think it's a very powerful activity, and it gives the client a way of expressing their experience from lots of different angles, with their thoughts and their emotions, some reflections even, but it's in their own words. This activity really gives the client a way of expressing the meaning of whatever has happened to them. You would need to have a fairly good understanding that the client could tolerate this activity actually. And again, the same thing as the drawing activity, you in your own mind need to have some understanding of the purpose of this activity. It can be very triggering. I think that would be obvious. So you have to be fairly sure that the client can manage that. One of the reasons it's less triggering than it might seem though is because it's fairly contained. It's a fairly contained activity because it keeps asking lots of very quick questions. So the client's actually not dwelling on one part of the answer and then moving on to the next. Having said that it's a fairly rapid activity, that might not be the case for some clients. The nature of their disability might mean that they take quite a long time to process what you're asking and then formulate and actually articulate the answer. So you need to be mindful of that as well. It doesn't mean they'll necessarily be sitting with the emotion, it's just the time it takes for that to happen. And that's the same with all communication with some people. That's quite an issue. I think too you need to be very mindful that most clients will aim to please, and there'll be a level of masking, so pretending that they understand what you're asking them. That's why that initial activity, what I call the more trivial activity, so the poem about their favourite food or their favourite TV show, doesn't matter what it is, that's a really good warm-up activity. And it builds on what I said before about the victim survivor drawing, that for the client to consent to doing an activity, they really need to know what it's about. So the food poem gives you an opportunity to say, now I'm wondering how you would feel about writing a poem about something much harder, about what happened to you. We're using the same process. I'll ask a series of questions and I'll write down your main answers. So then they can either say yes or no. I think it has a pretty obvious ending, and that would be the reading of the poem, which I usually always do. I can't think of a time where I haven't, because of I want to model because a big part of it is putting the emphasis in the right place, and saying the words as powerfully as what they are expressed really, or even with more power. So I read it to the client, and then we talk about how they feel about it. Like This activity can be is still useful for people with literacy issues because they're not expected to write. I'm doing the writing. I also do the reading at the end. It might limit, unfortunately, people going off and writing poems themselves, which some do. They really take off with this expression, this form of expression, and will come in week after week with a different poem or at various times. So obviously that might be a bit more limited for people with literacy issues, and also they wouldn't be able to then read the poem themselves, but they'd be dependent on other people reading it out to them. A lot of the clients will take their poem and show it to one of the other workers at Wild. I can remember one case, and this is the validating part. You know, one of the clients was so proud of her poem, she took it to her victim of crime worker and asked her to, she just gave it to her. The victim of crime worker read it and was obviously clearly very moved by what was in there, and that was incredibly validating for the client.